just because the market is moving to one-to-one services doesn't mean you necessarily should move to one-to-one services. And the reason being, we get so caught in following and flowing with the market, we forget it's important to do the thing that actually makes us happy, that actually we're good at the thing that we want to show up to on an ongoing basis.
Are you feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or uncertain about how to grow your business without sacrificing what really matters most? Welcome to The Business You Really Want, the show for women ready to build a sustainable, fully aligned business. Aligned with what, you ask? You, your values, your life. Seriously, it is possible. I'm Tanya Kubo, and along with business advisor extraordinaire Gwen Bortner, we're here to show you how.
One year ago, Gwen, we launched The Business That You Really Want, and our listeners have made it clear which conversations matter most. And today, we have finally reached the end of our countdown where we are going to talk about the number one most downloaded episode of the last year, which, once and only once do I get to say, of all time. And I have to add all this drama because actually our number one most downloaded episode was only 10 episodes ago. Not a lot has changed, but we had noticed back early part of this year that there was a shift in the market and people were moving away, not just from seeking, but also from selling group programs and kind of some of these big self-study courses toward high-touch one-on-one work. And what we posed, what we kind of discussed initially when the episode went out, I believe it was June 17th, was this is just evidence of what we've been seeing emerge over the last couple of years, which is people are tired of getting shoved into one-size-fits-all frameworks. They want a customized level of service. They want to do business with people who they feel see them, truly understand who they are, who they serve, what they want, and are willing to provide a customized solution to that end. And part of it, I think is because of AI. You, as well as I, have seen so many people churn out these AI-generated courses, which are I should not paint them all so poorly, but could be like the worst of the worst when it comes to a cookie-cutter solution. And it leaves people really hungry for human connection. And so we talked all about that when episode 46 dropped there in June. But when we were revisiting the episode going, that's really interesting that that's our most downloaded episode and it hasn't even been out that long, that you pointed out, maybe one big gaping hole that we didn't discuss. And so I'm going to let you, Gwen, take it from there and tell us, what did we miss in that episode?
So the one thing that we didn't talk about, at least not in any depth, we probably mentioned it, but we're probably not in any depth, was just because the market is moving to one-to-one services doesn't mean you necessarily should move to one-to-one services. And the reason being, we get so caught in following and flowing with the market, we forget it's important to do the thing that actually makes us happy, that actually we're good at the thing that we want to show up to on an ongoing basis. And so for me, I've been offering this, custom one-on-one services. Today, actually, I've been getting on LinkedIn all of these congratulations on my anniversary. So I must have used this date as my start date because it wasn't like an absolute formal start date. So it's like, oh, yay, me. 12, I think it's 12 is what it's showing on there. I think it's closer to 14 or 18, quite honestly. Years ago, I've been offering one-on-one services. Why? Because it's what I love doing. And me having a calendar like today where I will be on calls or recording from 8 a.m. till 3 o'clock with zero break. No little 5-minute run to the restroom. No, 0 break makes me really happy.
She's right. It really does make her happy.
I know,
really
it's hard
does.
for anyone else to believe. Yes, I'm a weirdo and I know it. And I'm okay with it. But that's also why I'm okay doing one-on-one services, because I can have 10, 12, 15 one-on-one clients and still be servicing them and, a very, very regular, constant basis, because that works for me and my personality, right? I know for you, having 15 one-on-one conversation kind of clients that you were needing to deal with every week, combined with everything else we would do, you would need to be poking your eyes out.
Yeah, kind of. Well, and it also depends on the type of service you deliver.
Right. Exactly.
'cause-
And in this case, I'm saying actually having 15 hours of one-on-one meetings every week minimum, plus all the other thing
right.
that would be not right. And so it does depend on the type of service you're delivering. How, are you delivering customized service, but not necessarily having to meet with people? Then that may still work.
Right.
Right.
Well, what I was going to say is, for me, right, an hour-long call usually yields 3 hours of offline work for me. So 15 hours of calls means that I'm not sleeping.
Right.
Back when I was when I worked for an online education company and I was a coach for them, even then, I don't know how you do it, Gwen, because I did really well up until about 6 calls a day. And those calls didn't require extra work, but there was the 6 calls plus the admin associated with the calls. That was kind of my limit, because we introverts, there's only so much people and we can do.
Right. And so I think that's the important piece that we often miss. And I'm not just saying it for this particular shift, but for every shift, because this is the shift that's happening now. There's going to be another shift that's going to happen again in the next, whatever. And then there'll be another shift, and then there'll be another shift, and there'll be another shift, and we will cycle back around, because those of us who've been doing this for, 40 years have seen these cycles in some form or another happen multiple times, again and again and again.
Internet dinos. That's who we are.
Yeah. So when we see that, what I think we do is we lose a lot of energy trying to keep up with the shift. As opposed to saying, what is the thing that I really love? And maybe tweaking it toward the shift, but not necessarily making this big, giant shift. So, using the example of, if you love creating and delivering courses, and you're saying, oh man, the courses just aren't selling, instead of saying, okay, I'm going to go to one-on-one consulting, but I really don't want to be on Zoom calls every day. Maybe you think about, how do we shift the course to feel more customized without me having to create this, to do this thing that I really, really hate, right? Because for me, the opposite has been true. I haven't, created a whole bunch of courses when courses were the thing, because I actually like doing the one-on-one work, right? So I think that's an important piece that we didn't discuss, is just because the market has shifted doesn't mean you need to completely change your business model if it doesn't work for you.
Yeah. Well, and so we need to unpack this a little bit, because you sort of shifted there for a moment, and it was nuanced enough that I want to make sure that people don't miss it. So yes, to the point of, if the trend toward one-on-one high-touch services works for you, by all means, jump on that. Go for, go with God. It's good for you. But if it doesn't, don't be taking an hour, a day, a week, a month, whatever, and reconstructing your whole business around the trend that you're seeing, because to your point, you do that and you could make a career out of chasing trends without ever getting any traction.
Right.
And I think that right there, Gwen, is what we need to be talking about next, because that piece, it's not what we really got onto the call necessarily today to talk about, but I think it's important because, to you, you're all about effectiveness, is the amount of wasted time, energy, and potentially investment of money in chasing trend after trend after trend. So talk to me about what you like. First of all, have you ever seen that work out well? Because if you have, we should know about that. Second, like, what is the cost that we don't realize when we're doing that?
Well, so I'll tell you when it works out well is when you chase a trend and discover that the new trend is actually the thing that you love.
Okay, fair.
Okay. So it can work out well, but that's typically a one-off and occasional kind of thing, right? Like you may have jumped into this industry when everything was about courses and you were able to do it. And then all of a sudden you start doing one-on-one. It's like, oh my God, I loved this. Right? Okay. Then that's worth all of the effort. But if you've just relished in the courses and the thought of working one-on-one just makes your skin crawl, there's probably no advantage to chasing that trend. You probably already know what's going on. So when it typically pays off is early in your entrepreneurial career where you may not have tried all of the things, and trying some of the new things may be like, oh, who knew? This is actually really cool. I love this. Right.
Right.
But if you've been doing this for a while and or you really are comfortable knowing, what your definition of success is for yourself in not just, in the typical ways we talk about it, but in the things that I love to do, what is my unique zone of genius, all of those things. You really are losing a whole lot of energy. And we've been talking about it more on quite a few of the last calls is energy is actually our most precious resource because it's really hard to measure. Time we can measure. We can say that took a day, right? And that's a day I'm not ever going to get back, but it took a day. Was it worth that investment? Money, super easy to measure. It took $1,000. It produced ROI. It didn't produce ROI, whatever. Really easy to measure. But energy is really hard to measure. And because of that, it's easy for it to just leak away in little tiny amounts that add up to giant oceans of energy over time. And I think when we're chasing things without a clear motivation for it, and I've struggled with the word. I think motivation really is the right word. Not that I'm doing it because I want the money, not because I'm doing it because it's the current trend, but because I'm really motivated for it. I think it's really easy to leak a tremendous amount of energy into it. Spinning, trying to make decisions, spinning around a particular decision, that can be a really big waste of energy. Trying a whole lot of variants of the same thing that are close, but none of them really feel right is another, potentially big waste of energy. I don't know. You can probably come up with 2 or 3 others, but I think that's where the real risk is. And then of course the other piece is the part that we actually can measure, because usually there is time and money associated with those things. And it's like, what if we would have invested the time, the money, and the energy into the thing that we already knows works, just may not be as easy to sell right now.
Yeah. Well, and may not be as easy to sell right now. May potentially just need to be packaged differently.
Right.
Like there's so many things that I think a lot of times when people come out and they say, oh, it's not selling anymore, that's actually not true. And that's not even what they mean, although I think they think it's what they mean. What they're really saying when they say, oh, it's not selling anymore is what I have historically said and done to sell this thing is no longer working. But rather than focus on, okay, so like, what's my appropriate positioning? What's my appropriate pricing? Do I need to rewrite a sales page, rewrite a bunch of sales emails, It's so much easier to be like, nope, this is all broken. I'll burn it all down and I'll go over here to this new thing. And when you were talking about, the time, the money, the energy that you spend, there's a whole lot of time that gets invested in learning how to do the other thing, right? Because you've got routines built around however you deliver your core offer, however you sell the product that you have. And if you're going to completely shift your model, then you've got to develop new routines. And something I saw when I saw this trend start to emerge is, I saw people who had let's just say 5 years ago, talked about how they weren't doing one-on-one anymore. They were doing these large to mid-size programs, and they were doing the large to mid-size programs because it gave them freedom and allowed them to, go take their kids to the park, do whatever that they wanted to do. And then when they shifted to the one-on-one work because their large and mid-size groups weren't selling anymore, they have to actually deprogram their audience, right? So now they have to develop a whole new batch of messaging that's like, oh, I know I said that, but right now I really want to get to know you. Right now I'm invested in you, right? Because they don't want to sound like they're lying, and they weren't lying, right? Things just changed for them, but they have to develop this whole new reputation and positioning in the market to then make people trust them enough to go into the high touch. And that's a lot of boomeranging. And back to what you said, it's not that you can never change. It's not that the decision you make today is the decision forever. But if you're boomeranging for the sake of chasing a trend, you're putting yourself through a lot of emotional work and hardship for something that you most likely aren't that invested in or getting much enjoyment from.
Right. And the whole thing about, chasing it, and I loved what you said, is it maybe it's just not selling, you're not selling it, you can't sell it the same way. Right. But it doesn't mean that you can't sell it, because the thing that popped in my head when you were saying that was, and I just don't pay that close of attention. You probably will tell me. We had the whole avian flu egg crisis thing, right? So if you would have said 2 years ago, would you pay, what were we paying? $10, $12,
yeah.
$15?
Between $11 to $13 for a dozen eggs.
Okay. So if 2 years ago, someone would say, in 2 years, you're going to be paying $1 an egg.
For conventional eggs, by the way.
Yeah, just regular old, not organic, grass-fed, raised on the moon eggs, just regular old eggs. Everyone would have said, there's no way that would ever happen. There's no way you could sell that. Right? But apparently you can.
Apparently people really like eggs way more than anybody thought they did.
Right? Eggs are used in a lot of things, but they are not, it's not water. It's not a critical, it's not the only way we can get a protein.
Right.
Like there are a lot of options out there, right? And there are undoubtedly some people who are not buying eggs at $1 an egg, right? I have zero doubt about that as well. But this is the whole thing. Like, could you sell that? Back then, we would have said there is no way that you could possibly sell that. Right? But the answer is yes, there is a way that you could possibly sell it. Now, part of that is supply and demand, which I think is also related to these market shifts. Because you mentioned it in the intro. People are able to create courses faster because they've got AI and all of the other things. And so maybe you can't sell this course for $9.97 anymore because it's not one of, 10 or 20 variants out there. It's now one of 200 variants out there. Right? And that yours is a way better variant, but how do you differentiate that to the average audience? Well, that's probably different messaging than when there was only 20 variants out there. Right? Now that there's 200, you're going to have different messaging because most of those 200 are not selling for $9.97. They're selling for $97.
Right.
Right. And they are definitely probably only a 10th of the value. They may only be a 20th of the value. They may only be a 100th of the value. Right. But different buying process, different thought process. And so often I think we try to do the big shift because it feels easier than the small shift, but I don't think it's ever actually easier.
Well, it's not. And I think we do the big shift because we look at somebody else and go, oh, they're where I want to be. And all they had to do is back to we're not taking into consideration maybe that's in perfect alignment with their personality and what they enjoy doing, and it's not in perfect alignment with me and what I enjoy and what I'm doing.
And we have no
And
idea all of the backstory,
right.
You can link in the show notes to the comparison trap one.
Right.
Because it really is. It's the comparison trap, right?
Well, exactly. And when we're spending so much time looking at what everybody else is doing and going, well, I could do that and I could do that. And why aren't I doing that? We seem to, and I feel like this is just a systemic issue, for some reason, assume that everything we see is 100% of what's there and what it takes to make it happen. As if
that has ever been true ever about anything ever since the beginning of time.
Right. As if the entire outside world knows the inner workings of our business and our offers. Right? Like the world sees 10%. And so I don't quite understand why we look at somebody else and go, I can do that, and behave as if everything we see is all that they had to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you're right. It's never that way. When you said that, I was thinking like back to caveman times. The first one that was actually showing like how to flint and how to start a fire. I was like, oh, well, I should have been able to figure that out. Well, undoubtedly, there were all sorts of other things and accidents and things. I mean, like truth is the beginning of time.
Well,
right?
and
we see the thing and we're like, oh, well, I should be able to do that.
Right. And I was thinking, what I was going to say earlier is thinking on this whole chasing trends. This takes me back to my days as a social media manager for a university. Now, that was pre-TikTok. TikTok did not exist back then, thankfully. I did not have to become an expert in TikTok. But, we would always be on some kind of path, right? Following some type of strategy, usually to drive enrollment. And you'd go and you would talk about the campaign, and this administrator would come in and they'd be like, but what about, and they would tell you about some trend that had their kids scrolling on their phone for like an hour. And that's what we need to be doing. And why aren't we doing that? And, I always had to be the unpopular person in the room to say, first things first, that, social media moves so quickly that if that is a trend right now, by the time I get a concept created and vetted through the 22,000 layers of bureaucracy and approval required in higher education, they will be on the 100th iteration of this trend, and we will look like the old fuddy-duddies that we all are. Right? That would be like the first thing I would have to bring up.
Right.
And then the second thing I would have to bring up is like I would have to break down the trend and be like, okay, this is why that trend's working, and this is why just the structure of higher ed makes that not applicable. And I think, again, we're so blinded, Gwen, and I need you to educate me on this because you've been at this like 40 years more than me. But we're so blinded by the idea that somebody else out there is working as hard as us, or gasp, potentially not as hard as us, and they're making more money, that we feel like it's a better investment of time and energy to chase what we think they have than it is to really look at what we're doing and figure out how do we make the most of this with the people we serve and what we like to do.
Well, and it's the comparison trap, because of course, all we ever see, like you said, is the 10%. And so we look at, insert big popular internet name here, as a speaker, as a consultant, as a course provider, I don't care what thing we add, put big popular name here. And we see mostly what they want us to see.
Wait, what? What? We only see what they want us to see, Gwen?
Right? So that's
Say
the
more.
Thing. But even if it's not that they're just wanting us to see things, it's like, why would I tell you about all of this other stuff? Because it's irrelevant to my messaging, to my conversation, to what I'm posting. So there's an example of someone who was very, very popular a while back, and internet, super internet famous, in the business marketing world. But what no one knew was all of the people that worked for her hated her, right? And every once in a while, you would interview someone and you'd find out that they worked for person X, and you'd ask a little bit about it, and they would be very quiet because, of course, they usually had NDAs and they can't say anything until you've worked with them for 2 or 3 years, and it's like, oh, and they're amazing. And then what you start hearing from it, you get these little bits, and it was like, oh, that was when you were working for so and so. Oh, that like they aren't telling stories out of right. But you can, we're smart. We can figure things out. And it was like, oh, yeah, everyone thinks that working on her team would just be the best dream ever. Right. But part of the reason that she's able to do what she's doing is because she is working these people to the bone.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if that's just not your personality, then you're not going to get the same results. You're just not. Right. And so, these are the things, there's so much behind the scenes, once again, yay, context matters. This is another thing of that there's so much context we can't possibly know.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And sometimes it has to do with timing. Right. There are some things that you just happen to be the right person at the right place at the right time with the right offer, with the right knowledge, with the right fill in all of the blanks. And all of a sudden, poof. Right. And it's like, oh, I want to be like them. Well, it's not going to happen because that time really could have been just a moment in time. And that moment is gone. Even if it's only been a month.
Yeah.
Right? That moment is gone. You can't do it. So back to, it's really about playing your own game and saying, what is the game I'm really, really good at?
Right.
And look at the trends and say, how do I leverage that trend where I still can be maximizing my game? I think there's almost always a way to do that, but we have to get creative instead of being copying.
Yeah. Well, and also I think what you just made me think about is, so there's trends in offers, right? There's trends in like what the market wants to buy, what problems the market is looking to solve and is willing to pay certain amounts of money for. But there's also trends in buying behavior. And I think sometimes we mistake a trend in buying behavior for a trend in what the market wants, like the problems the market is seeking to solve. And so one thing that is still holding true, it was true when we recorded episode 46. It is true now. People are taking longer to make their buying decisions. The sales cycle has gotten longer, mainly because I think everybody has finally recovered from like COVID's like stimulus money where it felt like they were just spending monopoly money. And now they realize it's their hard-earned money and they need to think about what to do with that. Also back to there's a lot of competing offers on the market. And so there used to be a time when if you wanted to be part of a group program, those programs sold in May and they sold in June or May and September. That was launch season. And the rest of the year maybe had 1 or 2 options for offers if you didn't take those. Now there's at least half a dozen things you can buy at any given time. So really thinking of, what is your data? Are people, are your sales really down? Or is it just that you're not selling as much in a 7-day period or a 1-month period as you used to sell? And then taking that information and then going, okay, how does that apply to what I love doing and what I don't love doing? Because I can imagine if you don't love the sales process, it may feel really grueling to have people take more time to make their buying decisions.
Well, and that's back to where I think we have to get creative to say what really is the thing. And if, for instance, the sales cycle is longer, then ask yourself, what could we do to make the sales cycle shorter? Right? A sales cycle, using my prior example, that's just a random example, sales cycle is going to be shorter for a $97 offer than it is for a $997 offer.
Yeah.
Just generally, because people don't think as hard about that. And so, one of the things might be, well, Could I make it shorter? Could I make it shorter by reducing the cost? Could I make it shorter by giving them free access to part of it? I mean, like there's so many, many things, but it really is understanding what has actually shifted versus are we perceiving, or what do we think might have shifted, right? We had an earlier conversation with folks where we were talking about right now things feel very uncertain. And, my comment to the whole group was, yes, except they've always been uncertain. We're just seeing the veil lifted.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So to me, that's the same thing of it may feel like, oh, no, the sales cycle was always easy. Well, it was probably always easy for this in this situation and these set of variables, but this set of variables has changed. So let's look at it differently and decide what that means and make a different choice without necessarily chasing the whole new thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think it's a way better use of the energy, back to the energy piece, to get creative on the thing that you already love than to get creative on creating something new.
Yeah. So I love that on this anniversary of our first year in podcasting, we're really getting back to, what's the business you really want? And so I'm curious, as we're following this trend, because so much of it is really about what's the business you want to build? What's the business you want to be running? What's the job you want to perform today? What are some questions do you think that listeners could ask themselves to get clear on what it is they really want?
So I think the first question really is the question. We've talked about it many times on many, many episodes, and it is an easy question that is very hard to answer. It's a simple question that is hard to answer. And that is, what does success really look like for me? Because when that filter becomes very, very clear, then you can run everything through that filter and say, does that get me closer to that definition of success? Right? Is doing X going to get me closer to that definition of success? Or is it taking a roundabout path to that definition of success, which is not actually the best way to go? Right? Because there's way too many things that can go astray on the roundabout option, right? So I think that's the first thing that you really have to be able to do, to be asking yourself the question. One of the other questions, once you've got that, is what is the biggest challenge? What's the biggest constraint? What's the biggest block? You can use the word that makes sense for you and your situation, but basically, what is preventing me from that success? Then asking yourself, I think, so what's the first thing I can do to get me past that block, right? And, these are the kind of questions that often I'm helping, my clients think through of, what are those things? But one of the other things that people don't necessarily think about doing is actually thinking through, what are the questions I should be asking myself? So it's a question about questions, right? What are the questions I should be asking myself?
Okay.
Right? Because it goes back to your observation just before this of, we may think it's X, but really it's Y. Right? And that's about taking time to say, what are the questions I should actually be asking myself? What if it wasn't what I'm assuming it is? What if it was something else? What else could it be?
Yeah.
Right? Back to getting creative about thinking about the problem.
So, what do you think inhibits that creativity? Or is that the topic for another episode?
It's probably the topic for the next episode, looking at how much time we put in, because that's one that we could go on for hours. But I really think we get caught in what I'm going to call the easy answer. And the easy answer is usually what someone else is telling us.
Yeah.
Right? So-and-so says it's this, so it must be that. Maybe. And maybe it is for them. But is that true for you? Maybe not.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that is an excellent place to leave us for this episode. As always, I love to turn it around to our listeners and say, hey, like how does this particular topic sit with you? Definitely drop me an email. I'm at Tanya@everydayeffectiveness.com. I would love to hear what your greatest challenge is when it comes to figuring out what it is that you really want and how what you really want aligns with whatever you see everyone else doing and those trends in the market. Gwen, it's hard to believe, but this wraps up our anniversary countdown of our top 4 episodes. You can see all 4 episodes in the show notes. I just want to say to our listeners, thank you for making the business you really want part of your journey for the past year. You listening to the episodes tells us exactly what kind of conversations matter most to you. And it helps us actually better craft the business we really want around here, doesn't it, Gwen?
Absolutely.
All right. Until next time, keep thinking hard about what it is that you really want.
Thanks for tuning in to The Business You Really Want with Gwen Bortner. I'm Tanya Kubo, reminding you that sustainable success is within reach. Make sure to subscribe to the show and visit thebusinessyoureallyWant.com for more resources. Until next time, keep dreaming big and acting with intention.